So what I'm going to spend the next 2 minutes on is talking through 2022. And I want to start talking not so much about our work as talking about the world that we were working in, right? I think it's important for us to reflect a little bit as we have a day like this on what the state of food security was in this province in 2022, because it was an intense, difficult year in a lot of ways, but also a year with a lot of positive momentum behind the kind of work that folks in this room are doing together. So, Carolann, you alluded to this. Nothing dominated any of our work more than the cost of living crisis that has hit all of us, right? And it's hit all of us in so many different ways, whether that's our personal household finances, the folks that we're working with, our organizational budgets, especially for people who are doing ground level services. It has reshaped what food security looks like in this province. And we expect that to continue in 2023. I think we look at the inflation numbers that are just coming out, we still see food prices way outpacing any other kind of inflation. You know, we're seeing 10% a year, and that's just not something that society can sustain, right? And so this really did dominate a lot of our work. At the same time, though, we really did see a lot of space opening up for change in 2022. There's folks here who are involved in some of the government processes behind that. So we saw the launch of the health court, which really says some transformational things about food security in lots of ways. I would put basic income at the top of that list, but there's a lot more in there. We see now work happening on a new social and economic well-being plan. There's some folks here who are working on that I expect will lead to some really positive shifts. There's conversations happening about reviewing the income support system. There's just a lot moving. When I talk to people around the country about the kind of social policy side of food security in Newfoundland and Labrador, they always say this is the province to watch. And I think we should keep that in mind. And that reminds us of the positive shifts that are also happening nationally. So a bunch of us this year have probably been in conversations with the federal government as they prepare to launch a national school food policy, which is something that many of us have been waiting for years. Canada is the only wealthy country without a national school food program that may be about to change. And that's really exciting to see. There's also a new disability benefit coming into place that really is going to reshape food security for folks with disabilities. It's effectively a small but meaningful basic income for folks who in this province are living on social assistance by and large if you can't be engaged in the labor market. So there's a lot happening at that national level in 2022 that bodes well. We also got a lot better data in 2022. We got new national food insecurity numbers from Proof, the folks who we depend on for that stuff. We got a new updated nutritious food basket number here for Newfoundland and Labrador, how much it costs a family to eat healthy food for a week. We know that a number on that. The folks in the Food Producers Forum were just talking to me about the data that they've been gathering around home-based food production, and so we know more about our food system now than we have for a long time. But we still don't know enough. So there's still huge gaps in our data. I think for those of us who are involved, especially in connecting with ground level frontline programs, we don't know a lot about what the day-to-day is looking like of the emergency or food charity side of that system. So there's still work to do. But we do enter 2023 with a lot of hope because there are a lot of levers for things to change. We know that the cost of living crisis is going to continue. We can hope, and I think there's reason to hope, that will motivate some policy responses that need to happen. We know that the connection between food and health is getting stronger, driven by the health accord, bringing food security into the biggest piece of spending that any provincial government does, which is the health budget. We know those national policy shifts are coming. We're seeing that action on poverty reduction, on well-being. There's an all-party committee on basic income formed now, so that this is really moving. We also see municipal governments really stepping up to the plate on food security. So in St. John's, there's now a food action plan that we helped develop. But outside of St. John's, 2 towns of all sizes are really coming together around food. We also see a lot of social innovation happening out around the province. There are people trying to do things in a different way, find different ways of supporting socially engaged work. There's a lot more support for experimentation out there than there was last year, the year before, or 10 years ago. And a good bit of that support and a good bit of that innovation is coming from Indigenous governments and Indigenous communities. We're really seeing leadership from Indigenous folks on food security, whether it's the community freezer infrastructure and the support for hunting and gathering that happens primarily in Labrador, whether it is Hullabaloo's engagement on this file. They are really driving a lot of innovation and a lot of work in food. And that connects, I think, to one thing that we're seeing, that there really is a bit of a grassroots groundswell happening here. People are talking about food security in all its dimensions. People care about this stuff. It is a very present issue in the public. And I think for Food First, that bodes well for making some progress on some of the big things we're going to talk about today. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do a really quick run through of our work in 2022. This is not meant to be exhaustive. What I'm really going to try and do is tee up the conversations that you folks can have after this presentation, where you can go and talk about these projects with the people who are running them on the ground. So we'll start in the retail sector, because this is one place our work has really grown this year, and with a number of projects. Food on the Move, our mobile market, is on the ground in St. John. Some of you may have shopped there already. Great Things in Store, you'll meet folks associated with that project in a bit, is working with 8 retailers around the province to improve food access. We're relaunching the Western Newfoundland Food Hub in very short order on the West Coast. And there's actually a bunch of places you can keep this conversation going. So we'll have Table 1, Food on the Move, and the Food Action Plan for St. John's. Table 2 is Great Things in Store. Table 3, you can come chat policy advocacy things, and the Food Hub will be. On that St. John's theme, that was another big piece of work for us this year. So we completed the St. John's Food Assessment. This was almost 2 years of community consultation through the middle of a pandemic, which was not exactly what we were anticipating doing with it. And that led to the city's first ever food action plan. A plan to 2025 and beyond, a number of themes, good food policy and planning, growing variety of local accessible food, connecting through food programs, youth raising awareness. And that is going to guide work, not just for us, but for lots of other organizations around St. John's for a number of years. And you can keep that conversation going over at table number 1. You don't have to memorize that stuff. I'm going to put it up at the end, don't you worry. We also spent a lot of time this year working on connections between food and public institutions. We really see institutional food as one of the big levers to move the food system in this province. So we did work with a group called the Labrador Anchor Collaborative. So ourselves, Shaji Indian First Nation, Manasiva, Manitoba, Government of Newfoundland, Labrador, and Labrador Mental Health are all partnering up to leverage the health system in Labrador to improve traditional food access there. And actually within the next couple of weeks, we're going to be serving traditional food on plates in the long-term care facility in Goose, which is really exciting. The random emails that you get in my job, I'm an extremely long email chain about caribou sourcing, so I'm just going to say there may be some caribou involved through some complicated machinations here. So we're also doing a lot of work to support local schools in farm to cafeteria projects. We're the local partner for Farm to Cafeteria Canada. That's a shot from Holy Heart, where we helped with their salad bar. We work nationally with the Coalition for Healthy School Food, as does Janine, our board member here, as well as the other local organization engaged there. And we've been doing lots of talking and submitting around things like social procurement and healthcare food purchasing. And so this is something that we think is going to be really important going forward. If you want to talk more about it after this, come find me. I'll be at table number 3. Talk your off. We also, as many of you know, invested a lot of time and energy this year in reimagining food charity. And many of you would have been at the Rethinking Food Charity gathering that we hosted in November as part of a year-long process. We talked to food insecure folks all over the province. We talked to food programs all over the province. And that is going to, I think, we'll have next month a report out that'll outline some ideas about how the food charity world can shift and change. On the other side of this, of course, we were running a food aid program of our own. As you all know, the Community Food Helpline, as you likely know, is closing down at the end of March after 3 years. And this year alone, more than 5,500 requests came through and almost 4,000 deliveries. And there are a number of members of the helpline team in this room, and it's been an incredibly heavy lift, and we have learned an awful lot about what the front lines of food insecurity look like in this province. So you can continue that conversation over at table 4 with Allison and Manny after this. I think think as many of you also know, this was a big year in advocacy for 2%. We have been doing a number of things. We've been helping convene and support a working group of community organizations called Basic Income NL, which has been doing a lot of work on the basic income file. We co-chair with the provincial government the food security working group, which formed during COVID and still meets every 2 weeks. We just sent out the agenda yesterday, Heidi co-chairs this, and we're at call number 79. So it is a thing. We are laying the groundwork now, and you can talk to Laurel, our staff member, about this, about forming a permanent lived and living experience advisory group. So folks with a lived and living experience of food insecurity all over this province, they'll be paid to meet and provide advice and thinking and develop their own advocacy skills around these issues. So we're going to start recruiting for that very soon. And we've been writing our heads off, many policy submissions going. And so you can keep these conversations going. Talk to me about policy at table 3. Talk to Laurel about the lived experience group at table 2. And Laurel and I have been matching outfits, so it's going to get very We also, as you know, we do a lot of communicating about our work in food. We get a lot of outreach requests, so our phone rings or our email dings at the office, but all sorts of, any kind of question you might have about food has come into our email. And we try our best to connect people to resources, to mentor and hold hands and help new things get going and existing things connect with each other. Those kind of requests are all over the map. It can be everything from where can I find some compost to how do I start a food bank? And we try and meet in all of them. We've done 30-odd speaking engagements, 80-odd media hits. We've got 4,000 people on our newsletter these days and another 11,000 on social media. And I think pretty intentionally about how we communicate and what we do with that reach that we have. And so if folks want to keep talking about this, Heather and Karen are going to be over at table number 6, talking communications and outreach. The other big priority for us, always a big priority, but especially in recent years, is around equity. We've been doing a lot of work as a team to think about what this work means and how to center equity in our work. This year, we've been doing an equity learning series with our staff, individual learning. We've been doing a lot of work on our land acknowledgements, actually. One of the things that we've been talking about is the need to really think about how those show up and what we're saying when we say them. We provide a living wage and peg to inflation, which is something I think that's pretty important from our perspective, to remain a living wage employer, to make sure that our staff are taken care of. That's been a strain sometimes, but we've managed it for sure. And we're actually in conversations now with folks about calculating the new living wage figure for the province, because right now we are attaching to an old one that we've adjusted, but we're hoping to update that this year. And then you'll see as Carolann and I go through the strategic framework how equity has really been embedded into that throughout that document. It's I think, a core part of what this work is going to look like for us going forward. Last piece, strengthening our team. So you'll have a chance after this chat to meet a number of our team members. Some of you may have met them before. We are growing fast. When I joined Food First 3 years ago, there were 6 of us, and we will probably hit 20 this year. It is really an intense time of growth for us. That comes with challenges, as you all know, making sure folks are supported and taken care of. So we're investing a lot in our internal capacity. We're getting ready to go regional. We'll be hiring staff in every region of the province this year, which is something that's been a dream of ours for a long time, to have boots on the ground, people who are just listening and understanding what's happening in the food system all over Newfoundland and Labrador. And how this all connects into the strategic framework. It's been a really big part of 2022 for us, and that's not going to change next year, I would say. So that's been this year, and I've been mentioning next year and the years forward quite a bit. And so what we want to do now is take you through that strategy that Carolann and I have both referenced a number of times, talk through a little bit what our new strategic framework is going to look like to meet this new world that we've just described to you. So Carolann, if you want to come back up, we're going to go back and forth on this one a little bit. We might just play pass the stick on this one because I'm suspicious of the other microphones right now. And this will make sure I don't talk over you. So I'll let you get this started.
All right, so we're back again. Anybody need a quick break? Get up and stretch. A couple of yoga teachers in the room.
Including Carolann.
Where are you, Jody? He was here. All right, so here we go. This was not an easy feat, and we're very happy to present this to you today. So our approach was this: every 3 years, so I'm going to say 3 years-ish with COVID, you know, give or take, we really have to have a look at the strategy. And this is a really, most boards should do this if they don't, but we're really making sure that we do this because times change, right? And the environment and the land changes. So top level framework, and it's really about thinking for the future and then guiding what the team at Food First is going to do for the next 3 years. I say 3-ish, sometimes that rolls into a 4th year. We looked at the mission and the vision and the values, which I mentioned in my opening, and we're going to look at those a little bit more in depth now in a couple of minutes, and you'll see a lot more clarity, which I'm really, really happy about. And our role in the community, as we've both talked about, is very different. And we need to grow, we need to roll with that, and not just kind of like passively roll with this, but really rise to the challenge to make sure we're doing what we're doing. Last framework was 2018-19, so you know we're in 23 now, so it's time. So the process was that the board got together in one of the board meetings and said, okay, this needed to happen. We pulled a strategic review committee together, so it was myself and Janine, I think you're still there, Josh, and Andre Myers, who's not here today and was unable to attend. We did the heavy lifting, and then we then rolled it out to the board, and then the board discussed from there. So we did long one-on-one interviews with partners in all kinds of sectors, so thank you to the staff for doing that, pulled from all kinds of other engagement. And then we had a really interesting board retreat where the staff and the board were able to get together, and we had board members from all across the province. So that was great, just to get to see people and know people and just understand where people's drive is coming from and where their passions are from. And then we had many rounds of revisions, as you can imagine, and really trying to wordsmith so that the clarity was key, and that we were all happy with that. We did have a very interesting second sober thought, maybe look, you know, from a firm looking at about equity, and have we thought about that in the right way, and have we included that? So thank you, Josh, for including that certainly within our, you know, within that strategic planning to make sure that was embedded. So.
Thanks, Carolann. And I should mention this before I go forward. We'll do the dance here, yeah. Before that I go forward, that what I covered in the last section, our annual report is now live. You all have it on postcards, annualreport.foodfirstnl.ca. And there's a ton more depth and detail and thought in there. So go check it out whenever you want. So, yeah, we thought a lot this year about our mission and our vision, where our organization sits in the world. So this is the mission that we entered 2022 with. To actively promote comprehensive community-based solutions to ensure access to adequate and healthy food for all. And I think this is all it works. It is a mission that's very descriptive of what we've been doing, but it is also a mission. I'll be honest with you, I've never been able to memorize it. That's one thing. But we did want to think about what could we boil this down to? What does our work really, if we push ourselves a little bit and think about where the world is going and where our work is going, where it sits, where it can go, and where we landed is this. Our mission is to advance everyone's right to food in a human laboratory. That's it. And we really think that the right to food contains a lot. It ties this work to something that we don't talk about nearly enough, which is that food is a human right, treaty obligation of this country since 1948. It's also something that we've never really made real, right? And it brings our minds around to the fact that making real shifts in the kind of work that we're doing together means connecting to shifting those policies, those systems, that this is a human rights issue that we can address. And that community-based action can really move the needle on. We also think that this is a mission statement that people can understand a little bit better, to be honest with you. We're really conscious of the fact that some of the language that we use at Food First and in this line of work isn't always the clearest. And so between the clarity, but that connection to something that I think we're going to see becoming much more a part of the national conversation around what is our right to food and what is the food that we have a right to is a really important conversation to have. We had a similar conversation about the organization's vision. So this vision, anyone thinking about international law and the UN and things, anyone would recognize this because this is actually drawn directly from the World Health Organization, a number of other sources. We envision a province where all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. That vision it's a powerful one, actually, when you think about it. And I have often asked people to think about, like, what does the world look like in which this is true? But at the same time, I think we felt like we wanted to have a vision that was a little bit more our own, one that the organization had developed and one that wasn't connected to drafting tables in international organizations, those kind of things. So here's where we landed. Oops. A province where everyone can eat with dignity and joy. And I think when we think about what joy and dignity means in food, we see a lot of stuff there. What does it mean to eat with dignity? To have the food that works for you, for your family, for the people you love, the people you spend time with. How can we really talk about having some joy in that? Because sometimes this work becomes a little bit too much about adequacy, about just enough. And we don't feel like just enough is enough anymore.
Yeah.
And so I think this focuses our mind on that, and on the fact that we can be really ambitious about what food security looks like, that it isn't just about everyone just getting by. And that sets a tall agenda for us, I'd say. This is where we got the board thinking a lot, but I think it's important that we name it. So again, with the new vision, I think we thought it was important to simplify our language, to have our own language. Did my mic just stop? Oh, there we go. We're having a mic first today. Let's get change batteries.
See, we can roll with it.
Yeah, I didn't use my super loud voice, but maybe can I borrow somebody from food first to change the mic batteries here?
Yeah.
Just swap it over with one of the other ones, I think. But I'll just keep going. I'll just keep going out loud for a second. Thank you, Cam. I think you can just swap batteries for one of the other ones, because they've been recently reanimated. Anyhow, we just wanted to capture a little bit more that many ways that food and food security show up for people in this province, right? That it looks differently for everybody, but that joy should be a constant for all of us in how we connect with our food. I'll say also, and I think for many of us who are in this conversation will recognize that the one word that's not as present in any of this language is the word health. And we should talk about it. This was, I would say, the thing that we talked about the most at the board table at our retreats about this. And there's a few reasons that the health doesn't sit quite the same way in our new statement as it did in the old one. Oh, thank you for the rescue. There we go, look at that. Teamwork makes the dream work. So we wanted to emphasize that food does have many connections with health, but they're complex. And I think what we're trying to step away from is the idea that food first has much of a role in thinking about what healthy food looks like. Because we aren't dietitians or nutritionists, but even in those worlds, as the dietitians and nutritionists in this room know, there is a complicated conversation happening right now about the word healthy, about healthy food, about what kind of things we're pushing people towards when we talk about healthy food. And we don't want to be the judge of that at Food First NL, to be honest with you. We think that too much emphasis on healthy food can sometimes also focus us a little bit too much on individual choices rather than systemic problems, right? There's a lot of judgment that goes into the healthy food conversation, whether we mean to or not. And that's not something that our organization wants to sit in right now. There's also a really important conversation happening around weight stigma and fat acceptance. In work around food, in recognizing that people can be healthy at all sizes. And so thinking about how health sits, I think we really want to acknowledge that complexity and recognize that a province where everyone's right to food is realized is a province that's going to be a lot healthier. but the journey to get there is more complex than just changing what any one individual person eats. And so I think that really went into informing our thinking on our vision and our mission going forward. So I'm going to pass it back to Carolann now, because Carolann can talk a bit about the pathways to make that vision and mission real.
Thank you. You really don't need the mic.
Nope. I'm a 4-year-old, I yell all day.
I don't have to yell anymore. It's just me. So we really wanted to make sure that we divided things up, but yet have some cohesiveness. So we have divided them into pathways. So advocating, so all these are action. Organizing, taking action, and valuing people. So while they're distinct separate buckets, they all come together at the end of the day, which is great. And it's about a clear connection to action, so that we can report and we can measure back into that. So that's a really, really important piece of that one. So advocating our goals, I mean, you'll see some, hopefully you can see in the back of the room here, strengthening food sovereignty, right? Evidence-based actions. So there's all kinds of these actions. So I'm not going to read these from the slides, and then I really would like for you to look this up so you have it at hand and you can look at all the other backup information that comes with it. But it's about meaningful, right? Meaningful actions that we're doing. Organizing. Well, we all need to organize, so we're looking at everything in that sector, but it's about convening the players and pulling everything together, but methodically doing that, and it's just not ad hoc. And I think when you write it down, it's really, really important to do that. So this is one that I think the staff, for example, will be very, very grateful for. Taking action. Well, there's no point in thinking about it unless we're going to take the action. And so this was another important pillar. They're all important. We boiled it down to these 4, but this one we thought was really interesting. Food security embedded in municipal strategies. And Josh had already talked about having regional players all around the province. So we're looking at a huge regional approach here and making sure that the entire province is covered and that we have communication from the province. So again, hopefully you can go look these up. And valuing people. Well, people need food, and it's all about us, right? So it's people. So for policy, we want to be known as the leader. Our reputation is very good right now. It's going to stay that way. And of course, we already mentioned embedding equity into everything we do. And some of us, I just have to say, some of us might understand, they have an understanding, a personal understanding of what equity is, but when you actually dive into what equity means, it's a really good exercise to do. So I know the staff are working very hard at that, but it might be something, sort of a challenge to individuals to think about if you really understand what that means and what that means to you, and maybe some of the other organizations that you're working in. And so if I did a show of hands here in this room, how many other people are on boards or working volunteer for organizations in the community? Yeah, there's a few hands going up, right? So this is the passion, and this is why we're here. So heads up with that one. So I thank you for that, because that was, it was a different philosophy in my mind after we did a lot of that. Okay, our guiding principles. I'm really happy to have these out in black and white, right? Honestly, accountability, measurement. Saying to Josh, okay, how did we do? Love the slide that talks about the communication, 80 media hits. This is helpful. Right here, right, to get our message across. So being a good corporate citizen, right, working with the media is really, really important. I want you to bring your eye to collaboration, communicating, celebration, and all of those things are very important. And we got lofty things that we're going to do this year. So if we don't do that, we'll never get them done. So what flows from the framework is an annual work plan. Because Josh and his team need to know what they're doing, right? So what are they going to do to get to those goals that the board has set? So that's an important piece, so that they're just not willy-nilly doing whatever they're going to do, but we're going to lay it all out, and you can then measure it back from there. Communications plan, of course, I don't know, but every couple of mornings, it's Josh from Food First on the news. And so the messaging is very clear, and I think with our new vision and mission, it's going to be very, very clear as to what we do, why we do it, and that people know that. So that's part of the clarity with that piece of it, right? And the evaluation thing, which is certainly going to come. So I want to thank everybody for picking up a copy or Googling our report and having a really good look through that, because there's a bunch of other things that come underneath it that explains this a little bit more and where we are. It's new. And I think we need everybody on board for that big warm hug to make this a reality. But I know that the team is incredibly committed to making this new, 3-year plan excellent and getting it off the ground. And everybody in this room, you will help in some way. So thank you again for being here.